Yes or no on the story? Dan, you're the first up from OR. Go ahead. Dan, yes or no? Thumbs up, thumbs down on the story, The Clown.
Thumbs up. I love your ideology. I completely agree with you. I'm curious to hear some of your stories and just get an idea about where you're coming from and what you were thinking at that time.
That's amazing. Well, that's what I'm a little afraid of, the revealing. The revealing. You know what I'm saying? Now, remember, it's fiction. What you're about to hear on this show is fiction. It is not Michael Savage. You get it?
Yeah.
Okay, and the names have not been changed. The names have been changed to protect the guilty, as they say. So there's one vote of yes. New York, Michael, go ahead, please. Yes or no on reading from the archives?
Must read The Clown because I am a clown, and this is National Clown Week.
Oh, my God, I told you I have a sixth sense about it. I know it. I swear to God, I reached into this file. I have hundreds of stories that were never published. And the one that I pulled out was called The Clown because I don't remember writing it.
I must tell you this. When people use clown as an insult, it irks me, so I say, too many politicians treat people like heels, but clowns touch their souls.
I agree 1,000%. It's funny you should mention it because I was talking about Red Skelton to somebody at the beginning of the week, and I remember that the man painted hundreds, if not more, images of paintings of clowns. Over and over and over again, Red Skelton, a great comedian who touched millions of lives, painted clowns over and over again. Why would he do that, Michael? Was he looking for the image of his own self?
I don't know. He was a troubled person. He had some trauma in his life, but he was very decent, and he had a clean act. I guess he was just engrossed in what clowns represent in their best sense, which is the celebration of life and entertainment.
But isn't it funny that the movie people have destroyed even the image of a clown? That we've gone so far in this society that they had to destroy even the image of a clown who was filled with pathos and turn him into something else like a murderer or a pervert. Think about what I'm saying. When I grew up, a clown was an interesting, a creature that touched you, filled with empathy and pathos, but they were never murderers. They were never portrayed as sick. And along came the most degenerated generation in American history who gave us the current administration. And their cohorts in Hollywood distorted the clown into a child molester or a rapist or a murderer. I think that's amazing. They even had to destroy that. George Washington, they turned him into a slaveholder. A clown, they turned into a murderer. You name it, they perverted it. Am I right about that?
You're absolutely right, but we will triumph because truth will prevail, and we have to keep the good fight, and thank you so much for discovering that gem.
Okay, well, I'm going to read it, and I hope that you still think it's a gem. I made a decision. Don't call on this anymore. No one said no. I've got callers from around the country saying definitely read that story. I had no idea this is National Clown Week because Obama's out of town. Okay, when I come back, The Clown, September 15th, 1973, handwritten manuscript, and that's it. We'll see what you think. Right back. Welcome back to the Savage Nation. We're taking a slight diversion. Uncovered in a warehouse, storage house, the missing manuscripts of Michael Savage. This is from September 15, 1973, Nuuanu, handwritten, looks like calligraphy, called The Clown. It was Josco's first big night. Before the faded Velvet Auditorium stood a portly Algerian, warming them up with depressing tales of life in a Parisian monastery. The Algerian described the 6-year-old on his first date, deposited by his father, a mean but impeccable dandy of a man who wanted nothing more to do with his offspring. The other frightened boys in their scant blue shorts, their terror of the brothers. The audience responded with a roar of respectful silence as the master of ceremonies improved upon the popular conception of homosexual monks. At the French school, it seemed, at least in the Algerian's mind, the brothers responded to nothing the boys would do except to their digressions. Through beatings, the boys came to know their teachers. The Algerian penetrated the 30 or so paying customers and the other 1,470 empty velvet seats, with his piercing whinny of a laugh, as he described how the boy eventually came to violate a different rule each day, just so he would have human contact, even though the contact was through a stick applied to his back. Conversation between the boys was forbidden. Only the brothers had the God-given right to pass words. The boy was choking in this silence, and so each day a beating and a good yell from one of the brothers came to return him to the world of man. Josko finished his eyes, the most difficult part. Cheeks, nose, mouth, these were all plastic. But the eyes, his a soft brown in boyhood, now black, but so deep in their effect that they reached everyone they examined. They were needing alteration tonight. Josko had decided to play Michael the Archangel and needed piercing blue eyes. Color alteration was simple, a set of lenses, but how to preserve his piercing shine, that was his problem. The Algerian was finishing up by carrying the crowd through 11 more years at the Parisian monastery, each year punctuated by one visit at Christmas time from the boy's father, sometimes with a box of chocolates, other times with a shirt or other small articles, but the stay was never more than 15 minutes or half an hour at most. A strange theater company, they called themselves Le Théâtre du Merde. The Algerian and the Jew lived in a large, dilapidated Victorian mansion filled mainly with books and bronze statues of bulls, warriors, thinkers, a peddling water boy, and horses, but none of woman. The Algerian shared his rooms with a Chinese girl. Beautiful when he met her 4 years before, she was now dying of a discreet fungus infection that had destroyed half her face. The Russian lived alone. He had made 3 fortunes in his 31 years. The first in making pornographic films, the second as a writer of guidebooks about the world of plants, and the third he earned by marketing a plant remedy which reversed impotence that he had discovered on one of his many trips to the village people of New Ireland. The drug was bought by a large drug firm and earned the company a fortune while saving the souls of many desperate men. The clown had had 2 wives and 1 son. Each marriage ended due to his demanding need to be listened to. At any time of the night or day, Martin, as he was then called, would be up on an idea and in frantic need of an audience. As he learned over 10 years, an audience of 1 is the most difficult in the world. 500 or 1,000 people, or 350,000 if you consider his readership as an embodied audience, could be moved, albeit like a sluggish beast at first, but it could be moved. By singling out first one and then another and others of the assortment of faces, the clown had found he was able to spark a crowd, as he called it, into response. After the first harmonium of laughter, Josko would become a saint. Freed of earthly duties, he became a flashing form of magic that projected great feelings in the chest of the observer. His career as a clown had had a rough road. Once performing nightly in his own club to a small group of followers, Josko lost his mind one night and needed 19 months in a private institution in the mountains to find his center. This night was his first on stage since that day on the bridge 1.5 years before, when they had all gone in their own directions. Adjusting his huge canary bow tie in the rented theater, Josko flashed back on that day. Reaching for his ancestral silver cup filled with a drink strange to the metal, he gulped the Jamaican rum and remembered that he was now drinking during the day, a bad sign. The only point that remained unclear in his mind was why he had chosen a bridge. Evaluating his makeup, and this point in front of the long mirror which he had brought in for his performances, Josko heard the voice of Dr. Figment telling him to not focus on that awful moment when he came apart. Why crucify yourself with the question of what gave rise to the general sadness of your life and the moment of dissolution, said the doctor. Still, he could not quickly jump from the image of the small boy screaming as he was pushed over the railing. Insanity and the best West Coast lawyer gave him legal freedom, but even expensive psychiatrists were unable to free this man of his own conscience. In the long months in the mountains, after the usual cycle of hysteria followed by catatonia, The cycle repeated several times a day at first, but gradually diminishing in frequency until the man was able to have enough time between cycles to experience the performance of his own life activities. He had done much reading. He had always been interested in the life activities of primitive peoples, but now he pathologically only read about such things as related to murder, cannibalism, patricide, genocide, and of course infanticide. I'll pause right there. I'm reading from The Clown, written in 1973. Most of the people are calling saying continue the story. It's only 2 more pages. The Clown, 1973, and it's about Josko the Clown, and he has an Algerian friend warming him up. And the Algerian talks about his life in a Parisian monastery where he wasn't able to talk. And Josko is getting ready to go on stage. When we broke off, he was sitting in front of a mirror. And in front of the mirror, as he's putting on his makeup, his clown makeup, he remembers his mental breakdown. And he's thinking back on it. And he remembers the doctor saying to him to just stay focused and to not go back and back over what happened to him. So we go back again. Still, he could not quickly jump from the image of the small blonde-haired boy screaming as he was pushed over the railing. Insanity and the best West Coast lawyer gave him legal freedom, but even expensive psychiatrists were unable to free this man of his own conscience. In the long months in the mountains after the usual cycle of hysteria, followed by catatonia, the cycle repeated several times a day at first, but gradually diminishing in frequency until the man was able to have enough time between cycles to experience the performance of his own life activities. He had done much reading. He had always been interested in the life activities of so-called primitive peoples, but now he pathologically only read about such things as related to murder, cannibalism, patricide, genocide, and of course infanticide. Of course he had had inklings before that day. Once on an overnight hike with his little family, the Nukes as he referred to his little family, the Nukes, he had had a strong negative current overcome him. They were all camped out for the night on a ledge 30 feet above a crystalline stream, dammed up as a fish pond, when he felt the nearly overwhelming desire to throw his child to the waters below. Getting a hold of himself, as most sane men do when they feel such primitive urges, the man quickly awakened his wife and child, and startling them into their clothing, he insisted they make the 6 miles back right then in the moonlight and lantern, which they did. But then the night on the bridge, his wife's subsequent suicide, and his years in the mountains were mere memories now. Through the monitor, Josko heard the Algerian's last lines and lifted himself for the performance. That's the end of The Clown. Now, there's one little note at the end of the story about what the stage set should look like. I don't know whether this was a short story or whatever, but the theater is, quote, shabby but elegant, velvet with gold ropes, a proscenium, boxes in a poor section of town. The stage, when the Algerian performs, a sign on the stage right says, "No responding, please." Throughout his performance, no audience response, except for an occasional cough, the sounds of traffic outside, or better still, impossible rock music penetrating from a neighborhood bar. When Josko performs, though, great response is required. He lives for these sounds. Opening night, 30 people, his comeback, a poor response. But in fades back to his earliest successes, full houses roaring. I guess there's another page I'm not going to bore you with, but it's the Victorian Mansion House and what it actually looks like for the movie version of Josko the Clown. All right, 1-800-449-8255, michaelsavage.com. So I took a chance. I walked on a tightrope with you today on the Savage Nation. It's something that left me with cold hands, as though I was just beginning in radio. It's a very tough thing to do, but after 16 years in radio, mainly doing politics 95% of the time, I have to tell you that I myself need to rejuvenate myself. And I need to open up some other parts of myself that have never been really, I don't know what to use the word, exposed or whatever on the Savage Nation. And one of them is some of the writings, for better or for worse. The other part is the nutrition side. I'm going to do a segment or two a week, taking your calls on nutritional questions. I'm going to talk about my years as a social worker and what I observed actually being a social worker, as opposed to what the phony socialists tell you social workers do. I'll tell you what I saw working with the so-called poor and how they were scamming the system.